And everyone, I'd like to welcome you all here today and also our viewing audience to the July 11th, 2019 meeting of the City of Davenport Zoning Board of Adjustment. Your participation in city government is appreciated and welcome. If you have a pager or cell phone, please turn it off now. Even if it's in silent mode, it may interfere with the room's electronics. My name is Kathleen Hart. I'm chairman of this committee, and the members present today, to my left is Lynn Cochran, and to my right, Carrie Strayhall. Staff present today, Scott Copes, and from legal, Mallory Hoyt. The Zoning Board of Adjustment is a 5-member judicatory board established by state law. We are appointed by mayor and confirmed by city council to serve without compensation for a 5-year term. We normally meet twice each month to hear appeals involving hardships from strict application of current zoning laws. We may also grant variances and rule on a variety of discretionary permits. Do we have any corrections from the minutes of our last meeting? Here, seeing none, I'd take a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That passes. We have one item, no old business, I should clarify. We have one item of new business, and this is a request of Dan Gunstein of WK First Edition. Would like to, before we get into this, inform the petitioner that need to discuss with the petitioner. Any petition that comes through here must pass by a majority of the board, of the full board, which means three votes are necessary for this to pass. In order for that to happen today, obviously everybody here has to approve your request. Because this is, there are only the 3 of us, there is the unique option for you to table this until the next cycle, which would be in 2 weeks. And there's a more likelihood, I don't know of any absences scheduled, that we would have a full 5-member board, and you would have 2 other votes to work with to perhaps get your 3 votes. So that's up to you. If you'd like to proceed today, we will do so. If you'd like to table this, we will do so.
We'd like to proceed.
Okay, you'd like to proceed? Okay. Okay. Scott, if you would please present for the city, and I should introduce all of this petition real quickly. This is request HV19-09 of Dan Gunstein at WK First Edition Lot 1, which is at 3902 North LC Avenue, located at the corner of LC and West Kimberly Road. This is for a hardship variance to encroach into the required buffer yard along the north property line to accommodate a car wash development. The property is zoned C2 Corridor Commercial. Section 17.11.080.A.3 and C.1 require a 15-foot buffer yard where a non-residential district is adjacent to a residential district. The property to the north is zoned R4 residential. And Scott, if you would please present for the city.
Scott Copes, Community Planning. So if you picked up in our staff report, we mentioned that this site on the corner of LC and Kimberly was recently rezoned. It was residential and now it's commercial C2. It was rezoned for this particular development. These 2 homes here have been demolished and are not there anymore. This duplex is the property on the north boundary. The plat that was recently done for this area included both of these lots here, and there is an access for this car wash for this use to exit out to this access street over here as well. And so here's the site plan. This white area here is the building. This would be the access off of LC. The only other access is off of this kind of like what serves like a frontage road over here. And then the parking here, and then the drive-through goes around the parking and the building. If you also remember in the staff report, the petitioner mentioned a 12-foot strip of property that has been given to the city, dedicated to the city for right-of-way. That was part of the rezoning that happened back in January. And so this just shows you where that buffer yard is. So the buffer yard's required to be 15 feet wide. And what is in red is actually 3.9 feet. So that's what they're proposing. So, you know, it should be about double or 3 times that size is what the normal buffer is from between residential and commercial developments. We sent out notices. I have not received anything, either phone calls or emails. However, Bruce Berger, our department head, has received some communication. I think the Alderman Dickman said that something came in. So the property owner, at the very top of this map, Mr. Scott, at the time the rezoning went through, he complained that right now he already had problems with trash against his fence, and he didn't want additional traffic. I don't know if this gentleman's coming here. He's not here today. I haven't received anything in email as of like 6 minutes ago. So that's the notices that went out. That's the notice area. And so our recommendation, our findings, this is a known issue. The size of the lot has been known since January. The size of the building has not been scaled back, even though they knew the dedication of the 12-foot of right-of-way would be needed. So there's not a hardship here, according to staff's findings. The physical surroundings of the property is, for the most part, flat. It's going to be graded flat, and they'll handle drainage appropriately. But there's nothing on the property that physically restricts this property from being developed as a commercial use. Unique circumstances. There's commercial properties all over the city that are this size or smaller, and they make the uses fit those properties. And protection of essential character, it does create something that's going to be there permanently. If the variance was granted, it would be permanently 11 feet closer to the residential property than what it would be had the full buffer been there. And for our recommendation, staff recommends denial against the request as proposed.
Thank you, Scott. Are there any questions for Scott? All right, thank you. And is this Mr. Gerstein that's here to speak to this matter? If you go ahead and come up to the podium, give us your name, and then present your case to us, please.
My name is actually Judd Huff. I'm one of the owners and partners with Mr. Gunstein, who is out of town on a family vacation today. So he's asked me to step in. Our building originally, we have a hardship with the 12-foot off of Kimberly Road that we lost. And now with this 15-foot buffer on the back end, we've already shrunk our building from 160-foot length down to 150. We cannot go any lower. We purchased the entire piece of property that you see there in front of you. It's a very pricey piece of land. We have some interested parties in the section there off to your left that you see there that's, that's vacant. There's this project on our behalf. We cannot shrink our building any further. We currently have one of these locations in Moline. You will see that if anybody wanted to look over on the Avenue of the Cities in Moline, you'll see it's a very clean piece of property. There's no trash. People litter, we pick it up. It's a very pristine, clean piece of property, and that's how we run it. The buffer on the back end, there's just not 15 foot to give. We need people to be able to come out of the tunnel of the car wash, to turn right to go out onto Elsie to exit, or to turn left to come back in. And where those parking spaces are, those are actually our vacuums that are free vacuums for people to clean their car out. It's a quiet vacuum. It's not like this big loud noise that's going to bother anybody. We're good neighbors. We're good neighbors for people. This hardship, if we don't get this ordinance, this could very possibly kill a project. And I've lived in Davenport since 1982, and that land's been available since 1982. And I'm willing to do something on the west side of Davenport, and I'd like to develop this. And like I said, we cannot, you could sit there and say, well, you could turn your car wash the other direction, but then that would not allow us to actually sell off that other section of land. And for the price we paid, we had to buy the entire thing. And for the price we're gonna have to pay for it, it would not be it's not feasible for us to operate a car wash, paying that much money for that piece of land without selling part of it off to another potential business. Tom, did I leave anything out?
Okay.
So,
Any commissioner questions? Carrie?
Just a quick one. So you bought the property knowing, though, that you were going to be short on what you needed?
when we originally, we have not purchased the property yet. There's an agreement in place, but we have not signed the papers. We knew nothing about the 12-foot coming off of Kimberly Road. And when I walked in here today, I was under the understanding it was 12 foot off of the backside, and I'm just hearing within the last 20 minutes about it being 15 foot. I didn't know about it being 15, I only knew about it being 12.
Okay, thank you. Then can you reply to that, Scott?
Ryan Rusnek was in communication with the petitioner. I don't know if it's faulty memory, but the code has always been 15 for this new code. Now, the old code, which was approved January 20, that might have been different, but pretty sure Ryan was quoting to the property owner or the future property owner that it would be 15.
Thank you.
I mean, to be honest with you, this is a deal breaker if we do not get it.
Any other commissioner questions? All right, we can proceed to a vote on this. If we could get a motion on the table.
I would move to approve.
Second, please.
I'm sorry, if I,
No, I just have a question,
Okay.
Carrie.
okay.
So the hardship was not proven, though, with our standards. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, this property is being bought on contingency, so we've had people buy properties on contingency getting the variance approved or getting something approved, and if it doesn't get approved, then typically these things, the purchase doesn't go forward. I don't know if they have a contingency in here for the hardship variance. If I was the one purchasing it, I would. I don't know the exact details on that. I haven't been given that information. But January 20 is when the new code's been in place with the 15-foot requirement.
When was the agreement made? Purchase agreement?
Tom Dalton with Rural Commercial Company in Davenport, and we was involved in this project from the rezoning process, and so first we had to get the property rezoned that included the residential buildings and so on, and under the conditions that were imposed on the rezoning, it listed Department of Transportation to be contacted for any work along the highway, extension of the right-of-way line from the west property along Kimberly may need to be dedicated, and that's the 12-foot on the south end that was mentioned. No parking along the west side of LC along the proposed commercial development, and then access to the proposed development shall be no closer to Kimberly intersection than the north line of the existing 3916 LC address, which from the get-go on the rezoning pushed that driveway all the way to the top end of the property. But also there was no mention of the buffer on the rezoning, and I realize that's part of the ordinance, but everything else was mentioned on here, but no mention of a 15-foot buffer on the when it was rezoned. So that's what, they went forward with their engineering based on the rezoning, and that's, I think part of the reason why that may have gotten lost in the shuffle or whatever. But we've been involved in this for months and months, and so that's how that, because of the ordinance, how that road got pushed as far as we could to the north.
Scott, you had?
Well, I could clarify. So when properties get rezoned, we don't go through a whole site plan review process at a time. People who are interested in property owners can always ask us what are the setbacks for the property when they go to purchase a property or when they're thinking about rezoning. It sounds like that never happened, but we're always here to give what the required setbacks are. Zonings and rezonings don't provide, they don't go through a site review process and say, here's how far your parking lot has to be set back, here's where your building has to be set back. Sometimes there are additional conditions placed on rezonings, like the right-of-way that was dedicated, but that's not firming up or confirming setback distances for properties. So if they were trying to cite something on that property, the due diligence would be to find out what is the zoning code, how close can I get to each property line, figure out if the building fits given the size of the property they're purchasing. That's typically how a due diligence would go.
Thank you, Scott.
And for the record, Scott, could you clarify what the state definition of hardship is so that we're clear on what we must consider?
Well, I mean, the courts have ruled over time that if you deny reasonable use of the property, then it's grounds for a hardship.
So there would have to be proven an inability to use the property.
Right. So if the ordinance denies the use of the property, a reasonable use of the property. So if you have some sort of situation where the property is split by a creek and there's only an area that's not big enough conducive to a commercial business, let's say you only had a couple hundred square feet, well, most typical commercial businesses, that's not enough, so that would be grounds for a hardship. But a reasonable commercial use can be located on this property.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Any commissioner discussion or questions?
I have
Scott or Carrie?
another question for Scott. So, when we have proposals like this, how many times do you have an issue like this?
An issue like where we find out later on, late in the process,
Correct.
that they weren't aware of a setback. Not very often. It happens occasionally. It's at the board's discretion if they want to rectify the situation of not knowing what a setback was. It's up to the discretion of the board.
And for the petitioner, could you also clarify, you read from a document that mentioned the setback, the potential setback. What was the date of that notice? It sounded like a rather preliminary report about the property.
I believe it looks like it was on February 27th
Okay.
of this year.
And so you all, two things. Is this being purchased on this contingency? Or a contingency?
Yeah, there was a rezoning contingency on the purchase. So
Right.
we were trying to get that through.
So this decision also affects the decision on that purchase?
Once we got the zoning approved, then, it was everything moved ahead on that. So the contingency, there was no contingency in the contract to remedy also, we weren't aware of the 12-foot, the taking along 53rd until well into the process as well.
Okay.
Yes, Carrie.
But that, I guess because the petitioner wasn't aware of the 15-foot setback there, that they didn't make that a contingency in the purchase contract.
And it's my error on this. Any future comment, could you please move over to the microphone so we're sure that we've got that on record? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Carrie.
So, you divided this land, or you bought this knowing that the cost that you were going to put into this probably exceeded what you wanted, so you're going to sell the other part of that lot to help you with the cost, correct?
Correct.
So, is that other lot, I mean, so you could not have taken an extra bit of land and then sold the second part a little bit smaller?
No, because the way, with the length of our car wash tunnel itself,
Okay,
that's the biggest piece that was available, is right there. One thing that on the 15-foot, you know, if extra landscaping along, you know, to create like a berm, if you will, between the car wash and the property to the north, you know, we're willing to do something like that with, you know, get with Suburban or somebody and, you know, find out what's going to be a good buffer, if you will, to help create a landscaping buffer.
Scott, could you pull up the conditions again? I just want to make a point. Okay. So, I mean, what we have is we actually have 4 conditions. So I just want to point that out, that it's, you know, typically this board will look at 1, possibly 2, but even when you have 4, it would be, in my estimation, very unique circumstances for something to pass when you don't meet at least 4 of them. So just putting that out there.
And if I might add, this is not a discretionary issue. Those items that are listed up there, those are legally required items for consideration for hardship variances. So we need to be considering that all those are met in order to approve a hardship variance. And as Carrie is saying, that's a large amount that have not been met. And I just want to make absolutely clear, Scott, the reduction is between the business and the residential property to the north.
Correct.
And I'll simply say also that is a very sensitive balance to be putting commercial right next door to residential, and there's always difficulties making that work. But to crunch this down to 3 feet seems exceptionally difficult, especially when it is a business that operates machines and has traffic that runs through it constantly. I can definitely see that affects the character of that neighborhood, and certainly I believe we also have one other that it certainly could affect the value of the property. So, all that said, do we have any other questions, Carrie?
No, I will make a motion, though.
We were way off of Robert's rules. You can restate your order, please.
Right. So I can
I mean, your motion.
I can withdraw the first one.
Thank you.
I will again move to approve.
And then do we have a second so that we can vote on this?
Second.
All right, Carrie. Not Carrie. Carrie's here. Scott, if you could please call the vote.
Cochran,
No.
Straho,
No.
Hart.
No. Thank you so much for your time on this. I hope there's another way that you can manage to work this out with the property that you have there. Thank you.
Thank you.